Mr. Miyagi, and this is Mr. Miyagi's workshop. Today we're going to be going over the valve adjustment on an XS650. So, to get started, stuff that you're going to need. You're going to need a 12-meter wrench, and being this is an 82, we have 2/1000 or the 0.063 millimeter, and then we're going to need a 6/1000 or the 0.15 millimeter. This is the thicker one is for the exhaust, and the thinner one is, of course, for the intake. We're also going to need our stem adjuster, which hooks on here. Let me see if I can get a little closer look here. These go right in here. It's a little square head, and it just helps. You don't need these. I made this one out of a piece of metal and just took a file and filed it until it fit like it was supposed to fit. The next thing you're going to need is something to turn the crank. Some guys will use put it in gear and use the rear wheel and stuff, but since this is on the bench, I'm going to use a wrench to move this back and forth to get it where I want it centered. Next item, if you don't have any way of, if you put on a new PM system and you want to make sure you're on top dead, I made up this little tool. Now all this is a attachment that goes onto my compression gauge, and what I ended up doing is I just inserted, like on this one, I just inserted a bolt and then put a nut on the end of it. What you want to try to do is you want to try to get this, so the piston's about maybe a ½ inch from crowning out, and this just screws into the cylinder. After installing that in the spark plug hole, you want to mark a spot as a reference point. So you'll bring that around until it stops. You don't want to force it, you just want to bring it up and stop. So what you're doing is you're just bringing that piston up so it stops on the bolt head. If you go any harder, you're going to damage the top of that piston. So with the engine stop in place and a mark on your flywheel, you want to rotate this up until it stops. Now I've already marked this because I've done it, but you would mark a spot on there, then rotate around but not through. So when you come up to a stop, you want to go the opposite direction. Now we're going to go clockwise. We come around until we stop again. It's that mark right there. What you want to do now is you want to measure between these two marks, which mine was 1.25 inches, which means this is 5/8, and that is my top dead center. Now removing this will allow us to go all the way through. So you can bring that up, and there is your top center mark. And if you want to make sure, you can always put a little something in here, and you can feel it drop and go up. So now what we want to do is we want to determine which side we're going to adjust. And the way we do that is we watch which side is going up or down. So I'm feeling this one going up. These are moving, so both intake and exhaust are moving. So you want to bring those up on top dead center. What we're trying to do is that we're trying to get the cam in a position you notice how the rocker arms are moving. That's what you want to do. So what we want is that we want this smooth side on this here. So these are all the way down, or expanded up, excuse me, so that you can adjust these now. And then you do the same thing when you rotate over to the other side of 360 degrees. You're trying to get those rocker arms in basically in the center. So that's why I use a center mark. It makes it easy. Now both of these are in neutral. You can hear them, they're loose. These are tight on this side over here. So what I ended up doing, you end up breaking these loose, both of them. Now we're going to do the intake side. So that's a little, there we go, it slides in fairly nice. You're just adjusting these till you get a snug feel. You can still pull through and they're not too tight. Taking your little adjustment. Now this little tool is fairly nice. It's actually quite easy to make. You know, you just find a piece of scrap steel and file it, find some file. I happened to have the right size square file that fits right in there, so that worked quite nicely. Now you want to just take these, oops, wrong wrench, take these, hold that top square and snug just a little bit. Yeah, and if you feel that it needs to be a little bit more, and that feels pretty good right there. It's just a technique. You're going to have to play with this several times to get her down, but it's not all that bad. So now that's pretty good for the intake. So now we'll move to the exhaust valve, and we're doing the same thing here. Now we're using a 6/1000. That's pretty snug, so we want to back that off and just run it down till you feel it hit the feeler gauge. Now this one's a little tough, so we want to just slightly back it off. So I like to snug the nut, not tight, just give it a slight pressure to it. So when you're backing these off or going forward, that it's going to tend to hold it where you want. So that's a little loose. So now we're going to go right there. That feels good. So wrench back on. Better to use the box end. Hold that. And what you're trying to do is you're going to hold this way as you tighten. Hopefully it holds everything in place. So now you should be able to move that. There should be some resistance. But it shouldn't be enough to where you actually have to force yourself to really hang on. That should slide fairly easy. Now the valves are set on this side here. Now all we do is that we rotate this over to top dead. These guys should be tight. These guys should be loose. That. Hear that? Now I'd already checked these, but we'll slide them again. It's still kind of loose. A lot of times you just want to rotate these things through a couple of times. And we'll go ahead and just readjust everybody. Just to double check to make sure that you've gotten the adjustment pretty close. Now being that this is a new rebuilt motor, what I will do after 500 miles of break-in, I will readjust these again. So now all you have to do is put your caps on. I use the little O-rings on mine. You can use the little gaskets that come with the kits and stuff, but I kind of prefer the little O-rings. Seems like you get a little better seal in a sense. and it's easier. You don't have so much cleanup to do. Also, while we're here, we can do an adjustment on the chain itself. I don't remember what the millimeters is on this, but this is, I'm using an 1 1/16 wrench for loosening that nut off. One of the things you want to do here is that you want to rotate this engine over and watch that little unit in there go back and forth in there. And what that's doing is it's pushing against the rub part on the chain, and the timing chain, and giving it a little bit of tension so it won't do it. That is a 10mm wrench. A 10mm wrench, you tighten that in or out to where you get that little rod that rotates in there. To stay fairly close. So might want to go in just a little bit more, a little bit tension on there. You kind of want it just to ride where it's flush right against there as this unit's going around. Let me use this other. Okay, a little bit more on the cam adjusting for the cam chain. I just wanted to show you what that looked like. The chain runs up through here, and this is tension against the chain to give pressure to take slack out. Now there's the adjusters, depending on the year, they made a couple of them. The one, they just had the cap with a 22mm lockdown, and it turned out. Now this was a bit longer, but you can see, I don't know if you can see that, both of those are basically the same length. So one actually has a locker and then a cap goes on, and the other one is just a plain, ordinary. This goes down. Once it is adjusted, this locks everything into place too. I kind of like this style because if you have a little bit of tension on this, it could possibly turn this in a little more than what you want. But the basic idea is you want to get that so that when it's going over, it is riding, that little piston is riding flush with that nut area there. So that's basically, that's all that's doing, is pushing against, right here, pushing against it. It goes, fits in that little spot there, and applies tension against the chain. So if you're wondering how that worked, that's how it works. Well, that pretty much wraps it up for this episode. We've gone over the valve adjustment, the timing chain adjustment, how to set your top dead center, and what tools you might need for that. Next episode, we'll be talking about oil pumps and tack drives, and what kind of oil filter you might want to run. Plus, how to assemble your clutch throwout assembly, and what type of push rod you might want to run. So for now, this is Miyagi signing out. But wait, if you got a comment, you got a question, put it down below. Until then, like, share, and subscribe. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed yourself. Hope you learned something. Bye for now.